On day 2, we will start focusing on Chapter 2. Note that you have up to day 6 to finish your 2 first chapters. So you can go back and forth between Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 up to the 6th day of your program. As you begin Chapter 2, you are still in the exposition phase. Continue to put an emphasis on the world, on its inhabitants, on the creature it populates, on the landscapes, on the landmark, on the daily life and the daily issues. By the end of Chapter 2, you also want to start to expose the goal of your story. You want to display how your main themes will be treated in the following chapters. Chapter 2 will allow you to display how the inhabitants' life unfold. Go through quirks, go through daily conversation, simple description to articulate how the inhabitants live, whether you have sentient species, humanoid species, animals, or even the plants. Start to depict a synergistic world, a world where each inhabitant depends on the others, the following species. You also want to start to depict the relationships between the consumer and the resources by putting up some form of cooperation, some form of a trade system, some form of economy. Chapter 2 will allow you to display your threat. The threat is the first antagonist your main character or your main character's group will encounter. They will generally encounter her by the end of Chapter 2 or the third scene of Chapter 2. But you can introduce the threat as soon as the first part of Chapter 1. It's just that if you haven't introduced her yet, the third scene of Chapter 2 will be your turning point. A turning point, as the threat is an antagonist which is supposed to remain for a large part of the story. Remember, this antagonist can later join forces with the protagonist, or she can join forces with an even bigger antagonist, or she can become this bigger antagonist herself. These are the 3 main possibilities. There are others which will be displayed in the later chapters. Finally, you'll want to review your 4 main characters. Give them a name, give them a better sense of identity, fix their origins if you haven't yet, and give them each a quirk. Most chapters will be segmented into 3 scenes. We recommend to use this 3 scenes model if you're beginning. If you wish to add more scenes, if you wish to write up to 4, up to 5 scenes in each of your chapters, we recommend to do it on your 2nd or even your 3rd project, or if you're just advanced enough. Each scene will contain between 3 and 10 pages for a total of 9 to 30 pages. If you intend to spend 30 minutes a day on your project, we recommend you not to go over 4 pages per scene. And if you intend to spend 2 hours a day on your project, 10 pages a scene should be enough. There's a margin, of course. If you wish to write up to 12 pages, there's no problem with that. But going over 20 pages per scene would be seen as a sign of inefficiency. And maybe you'll need to shorten your phrases. Maybe you'll need to shorten your scenes themselves. These issues will be treated later into a part of concerning editing. Each scene will follow a 4-step pattern. We will display a location, characters, stakes and their resolution, and an outcome. For the first scene of Chapter 2, this pattern will be lightly altered. Rather than presenting a location, you will present a general atmosphere. Remember, you're still in the exposition. You have the ability to present a lot of location, a lot of new settings, a lot of new environments. Rather than character, we will present people, normal people, the common people of your story, the meat of your story. Rather than presenting stakes and resolution in the very first scene, we will present landscapes, as they are the places where the issues happen. And rather than the outcome, we will start to present organizations. Even if you didn't plan to include a large system, a developed hierarchy, we recommend you to create at least one organization, as they are the main source of conflict into your story. As per usual, when you'll present a new setting, when you'll present a new environment, start with the atmosphere. Present the climate lightly, present the impact of the light on the plants, on the animals, on the land, and always focus on colors. Making use of colors is not exclusive of the first scene of each chapter. Every time you can use color, use them. Wherever it's in a description phase, in a dialogue, in a fight, make use of color. They're generally your best sensitive landmark when it comes to converting emotion into action. Turn colors into people. Make these people vivid. Present them through colors. Give them the specific matter with the colors, blue people, red people, green people, or just the colors of the hair, the colors of the eyes, indigo eyes, purple skin, gray clothes, this sort of thing. Make use of color as much as possible in order to present an individual or a group's behavior trait. For example, while you're presenting people, while you're presenting the daily life, do it through conversations, simple conversations, either with your characters or only conversations that are heard by your characters. These conversations, these rumors, will be heard by your characters, and it will alert them on potential issues. These issues will lead them to certain landscapes and landmarks. The very fact that your character will be able to overhear or question people will give them an objective if they haven't a clear goal since the beginning of the story. This objective will be transcribed into the form of landscapes. Landscapes and landmarks are the places where the issues, where the action happens. And you want to treat them as a highly symbolic matter. Each landscape, whether it is a natural landscape or a man-made landscape, should be treated as a symbol. The mountain evokes something. The forest evokes something. The seas evoke something. The marshes, the plain, a tower, a castle, and so on. Every time you introduce a new landscape, try to shorten the title as much as possible. Just try to be as literal as possible when you present them as well. By visiting new landscapes, by visiting new landmarks, by visiting new territories, your characters and their teams will generally meet organizations. By organizations here, you can understand factions, whether they are opposing factions or supportive factions. Chapter 2 is maybe a little too early to color the intention of these organizations, but you can depict already their motto, their symbol, or what seems to be their apparent goal. Remember, organizations will be the main source of conflicts in your stories. Organizations administrate the world in which your characters evolve, and their goals, and therefore the conflict they generate, will change the atmosphere of your world. They will change the rhythm of your world. Organizations make your world evolve. So if you haven't, if you not intend to create an organization as at the beginning of your story at least, think about three things only. And organizations need these three factors: a goal, a symbol, and a hierarchy. For the first two, an organization may only need to acquire resources. That's one of the most common goals. For example, an organization may want to acquire land. They may want to acquire people. They may want to acquire a certain mineral resource. That's a valid goal. That's a simple goal. And then this goal will have repercussion, more complex repercussion later in the story. So start with a simple goal. Then a symbol. You can make use of the landscape or the landmark in which the organization is found to create a symbol. For example, your organization may be located in a castle. The castle itself may be located on an island. And the island adds the story of being, placed in the middle of a lake, for example, or a short sea. And the fact that it is situated here made the castle in a certain design with certain materials. So the very name of these materials, the very name of this design become the name of the organization and her symbol. Now for the hierarchy. The hierarchy may be the simplest part or the most complex part, depending on which kind of hierarchy you look for. If you're looking for a traditional pyramidal structure with a low number of officers and head and lots of subsidiaries and subordinates, it could be really simple. You can have a government type organization, you can have an army type organization, you can have a cult type organization. Or you can also have a trades type organization with multiple branches, and then the decision will be decentralized. There are multiple types of hierarchy, and they will be treated later. For now, if you're not sure how to create one, just give it a simple goal, a goal of harvesting resources, give it a simple symbol, and give it the most simple hierarchy you can think of. Chapter 2, Scene 2 contains the most regular pattern you will use to improvise any scene. So in a scene, you'll need a location, you'll need characters, you'll need stakes, and you'll need a resolution. Now, every time you introduce a location, or every time we return to a location, you have to make the distinction clear. If it is a new location, what makes it new? What makes it different from the former location? What makes it different from all the other locations in the story? If we already know it, what do we know about it? Or, say another way, what are its defining features? It is natural? Is it a man-made location? Is it who built it, if someone built it? With which intent? To which use? What was its original function? How did it evolve through time? Remember, think features, think quirks. Quirks are what will make your environment, your character, your tool, your storyline memorable. Same logic applies for characters. So, we arrive in the location. Is it new? Is it already known? Okay, we meet the character. Is it a new character or is it already known? When a character interacts with your protagonist and her partner, you have to ask yourself, what's her alignment? What are her affinities? These are two different concepts, but for now we'll keep them as just one. Where here, alignment would be to which kind of organization is this character aligned? To who is she referring? Is she subordinate to someone, maybe? Is she likely to oppose the main character and her team? And finally, you want to present the character's quirks. Again, make it memorable. You arrive in a new location or an unknown location, you meet a character, or you meet again with this character, and she comes to you, she comes to the protagonist with issues. What are these issues? What are the stakes linked to these issues? How is this character a stakeholder in the matter? And who are the other stakeholders? Now, this character, you may know her or you may not know her. Now, you have to understand that this character may have changed, and that's where it becomes a little more difficult to thread through. Now it's only chapter 2 now, so this character shouldn't have changed too much, you know? If you have a simple project, if you have a simple story, in chapter 2, characters didn't have the time to change too much. But if you're already on a series, if you're already on a saga, if you're already on a trilogy, this character may have changed a lot. So you may think it's a character I already know as the protagonist, but it's also a character that has changed a lot. And now she can present me new issues and new stakes. What are those? Why did she change her alignment? Does she have new quirks? As a general rule, don't change the quirks of a character. You know, it may be confusing. Now the stakes have been presented. Let's get to the resolution. When your characters have to solve a problem, think about who gave them this problem. Whose issues is that? And if you can, and you have to think about it into a game perspective to get this correctly. You have to be a little playful with the environment if you want to get this right. Think about the resolution of the problem in terms of the place they're at. You know, the location has specific features that you will display at the beginning of the scene. Now, how can you use these features to solve the problem? The whole process will be more organic if you can make all more intrinsic to the place, to the person, to the problem. Now, if your solution can be intrinsic to the location, to the character, to the issue, all will feel better, a lot better. So, once the mean of resolution has been presented and the problem is solved, you have to treat its effect. And here comes scene 3. Chapter 2, scene 3. The threat's revelation. Now you want to start this scene in a different fashion than the other scenes. You want to start with an issue. You're at the end of chapter 2 and you're preparing for chapter 3, which is your first crisis. The issue here, as it will be displayed, will be displayed through the perspective of your main character, but also through the perspective of your first antagonist. And by perspective, we don't mean that you need to compare their point of view directly. You know, you don't need to expose the point of view of the antagonist. You can if you want. It's a little more difficult. You can shift also the point of view to another character. For example, a character which supports the protagonist. So now, try to stay on the protagonist's point of view or her closest ally's point of view. It will be easier for the public to follow this way. Chapter 1 was the beginning of the exposition. And the scene number 1, scene number 3, and scene number 2 of chapter 1 were your way to the exposition. Same goes for chapter 2, scene number 1, and scene number 2. The scene number 3 of chapter 2 is the first scene in which you will delve into the crisis, the issue, the real action part of your story. You may have other action scenes since the beginning, and we recommend that you use at least one other action scene for rhythm's sake in chapter 1, for example. But now is the time where you start to assess the true anger, the true courage part of your story, the true action part of your story. And it can go at least 2 ways. You can go for action adventure, or you can go for action plus horror, or action plus drama, or action plus comedy, depending on the type of story you want to write. If you're unsure, because we haven't talked about genre yet, if you're unsure of which secondary genre to choose for the scene, because it's mainly action, we recommend that you go for action adventure, as it is the most accessible. When you display this first issue, ask yourself which organization is involved, and then you can write it directly, or you may not. You may just refer to the symbol of this organization. Ask yourself as well, whose responsibility is this? Whose responsibility will it be if the issue evolves? And again, think about the level design, think about the location. Why does this issue occurs here, in this place, in this setting? Now it's time to present the threat. Now, is the threat a new character, or is she a returning character? And what are her quirks? You'll present the threat as you present any other character. A quick description, quick physical and behavioral description, her color, if you know her color yet, and behavior. The threat will be mainly, just as the menace later, defined by her behavioral traits. So give her a behavioral quirk. You can give her a physical quirk as well, but the behavioral quirk will be much more remembered in this chapter at least. As far as resolution goes, you'll want to compose with the environment and make it just a clear trajectory for you. Every time you get into a new location, try to make use of this location in order to solve your issues. If you're somewhere, it will just present your characters highly adaptable, and that's really always a likable trait, you know. But you also have to consider the constraints of the location to imagine how you can solve the problem. Now, as the resolution unfolds, you want to use it to start developing, if it wasn't done yet, the relationship between the protagonist and this first antagonist, the threat. The threat and the protagonist should be linked. They should have a common interest. They should have a common motive, or they should have a common set of behavior. They should have a common trait, wherever it's a behavioral trait, their goal, or an interest. Once the issue of chapter 2, scene 3, namely the threat's apparition, is solved, you want to move to the outcome softly, because in chapter 2, the threat has only just appeared, and the issue you will solve really is just an issue the threat has caused. But then the threat is long gone when the chapter 2 has finished. Because now is not the time that the threat is defeated. This will be chapter 6. No. The threat will remain with the team during chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5, and chapter 6. And depending on how you write it, she can remain longer till the end of the story. But for now, you'll realize that the threat hasn't been beaten. The threat is here to stay until chapter 6 at least. So the outcome should depict this. Now the world has been changed. There's a threat. What will this threat do? Why does she do that? And why does it matter to us as character of the story? Just like day 1, you want to end day 2 by coming back to your main characters list. This template is a sample template. Then you have a synergistic pattern of relationships depicted here. Green depends of blue, blue depends of purple, and purple depends of red, and red depends of green. The thing is, that's just one pattern. You can customize it, and we entice you to customize it as much as you can. These are your characters. These 4 characters are the core of your story. They're the most important part. The elements which you want to fine-tune as much as possible. Now, for storyline, we got you covered. You can follow the chapter structure. The way we improvise scene, you can take it just as it is, and we recommend that you do that. But for the characters, go as precisely as you want. Make it as individual, really vary your identity. The 4 main characters are your identity transcribed in the story. We'll come back to this schema at the end of chapter 3. Well, you'll want to, you always want to make them more individual. You want to make them more subjective, more arbitrary, more you. You'll want to make them as individual as possible every time. But by the end of chapter 3, we'll go for a new milestone. But let's keep it to chapter 2 for now. First, you want to pick a color out of these 4. And this color will be the color of your protagonist. We'll start with red here. Let's suppose our protagonist is red. So her goal is red, her strengths are red, and her weaknesses are red. Not really, as you can see, but all of it, all the character is colored by her goal, and her goal is red. Detail on the goal. If you haven't found a name for your characters yet, think about that goal. The goal of the characters should be transcribed through their name. So you can literally take the goal of the character, if the goal is made out of 2 words, and you use those 2 words to create the name and the surname of your character. Of course, you'll want to refine it a little bit. You'll literally not put, if the goal of your character is to become strongest, you won't put name become and surname strongest. No, you'll look for a symbol. You look for a reference. You can make use of mythologies, for example. You can make use of religious symbols to create the goal of the name of your character. You can also use the tool the character is using, or the place of her origin. But the name of the character should be directly linked to her goal. It should be a direct retranscription. Now, let's suppose your character is red, but your character can be green, it can be blue, or it can be purple. Just really pick one of the 4 and impersonate it. The red character will have 2 strengths and 2 weaknesses that are directly dependent on green, on blue, and on purple. Now, let's suppose the antagonist of red is purple. What's the relationship between these 2? So you see that in the quadrant, that strength in the top left corner is written in purple. So the strength of each character will be dependent on the behavior of purple, the color purple, the element purple, the idea purple. But what does that mean for you? If you have found, or if you haven't found 2 strengths for your characters yet, just think about it this way. How are the 4 behavioral trait purple of these 4 characters linked? Which strength does that correspond to? If you have that as early as chapter 2, the rest will be much easier. You don't have that, and it's extremely difficult to find it in the very first stage, and if you're a beginner, it may feel very foreign. But think about it in terms of interaction, simply. Let's suppose purple is the main antagonist, or the menace, and blue, for example, was the threat, is the threat. So later in the story, she can join purple or she can join red. For now, we'll present it this way, it will be easier. And so it leaves us with green as a support. So why did I pick purple and green with these functions? So green is a source of strength, as you can see in every quadrant. But why is it a source of strength? The character whose function is support will be mainly a supporter. That seems absolutely obvious. Now, this character will always support other, and therefore she should become a source of strength. And at the same time, the main antagonist or the menace, or purple here, will also be a source of strength. She will be a source of strength because she put trials in front of the other characters, wherever it is the protagonist, the threat, or the support. So she reinforced them by being antagonistic. So a support or an antagonist are both sources of strength. Now, why did I pick red and blue as, the weak characters? Let's suppose in the story that blue joined forces with red to face purple indeed. Well, your main character will have a problem. Your main character, red here, should have a problem. She should have weaknesses. She should have some form of handicap. As the story grows, she will get stronger, but she will have a scar in the beginning of the story. And as a scar never heals, no, it just reinforces. You have to make her grow, but by preserving this scar, by preserving this weakness. So the weakness will always be there, even at the end of the story. Even if the end of the story is in 10 books, your main character will always have it, but she will learn to live with it. Same for blue. Blue here will be displayed as the nemesis of red. She will be a mirror. But it doesn't mean that she will always be adversarial with her. No, she can be a rival, but she can also become the closest friend of red, even more so than green, for example. So, why do we want these two colors as weak colors? Because when you think about it, these two colors exist in mirror. So, just as purple and green are mirrors of strength, red and blue are mirrors of weakness. If one of them has to keep her weaknesses till the end of the story, the other has to. And it will be a different weakness. And it will be a weakness that's directly dependent on the weakness of the first character. So that's a global explanation on how you can make use of these 4 colors. So pick your color. For example, if you want purple to be your main character, do the same thing. So your main character is purple, but now purple becomes a color of weakness, because your main character. And green becomes the main antagonist of purple, so it's also a color of weakness because they're mirrored. Of course, you can customize this template as much as you want, and we highly encourage you that you customize this template as much as you can, because really the 4 main characters are the core of your story. They're the core of your identity. They're the meat. They're really what the public should remember and probably will. So customize them as much as you can, because that's you.